Hey, folks.
Hi, AJ.
Good evening.
All right, let's see. Okay, let's see who we got here. Bob, Jim, Susie, Becky. So I don't see George.
George is there, was there.
Marty.
Oh, I see. And Melody cannot join us today. She is in North Carolina. Thought she would be able to make it for part of the meeting, but cannot. All right, so as soon as George connects here, I see he's reconnecting. We can get started.
George is identified as Marty down there. You
Yes.
notice that?
There he is.
Barely hear anybody.
No problem. All right, so we've got just a quick agenda review. We've got 2 budget reviews today. Fire department's going to go first, and then police department, and then got a bunch of different sort of topics to update one another on, and then there was kind of a last minute budget request that Miriam is going to discuss with us, coming from the Conservation Commission. All right. So who do we have from the fire department joining us today?
George.
right,
AJ, I'm going to reach out to Lenny. It should be Lenny Zerwanka.
Yeah.
Chief.
Okay, I don't, all right, so I think until Lenny comes on, why don't we tackle the minutes, just get that out of the way. So these are minutes from November 15th, right? Yes, November 15th. Susie sent them out. Everybody had a chance to review them. Any questions about them? All right, Jim Hemingway. You're muted, Jim.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
It's the first section, 1B, then 3. This is tiny, but could you put some dollar signs in front of 3-4600? It just might, someone reading it might not quite understand what's going on there.
Okay.
Are these, is 1 and 3 the same?
Sorry, say that again, George.
Is 1 and 3 the same equipment?
The mower.
No.
Okay, the $4,600 is a coincidence.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it being repaired at Devon Lane? I thought it was being repaired somewhere else.
The
But
lower at Devon Lane.
It was
was?
definitely,
it was Devon Lane, okay.
yeah, I remember that part. Number 2, Conservation Commission budget request. In A,
Yep.
the second sentence, permit in the past commissions. I think the word permit shouldn't be there.
Permit.
Yeah, I think that probably just needs to drop that word. Second sentence, 2A.
Yeah, I see. I'm trying to figure out what
Oh, yeah.
is for those costs. Permit in the past. Those are just, the commission has been able to apply other. Again, I guess it's just in the past, right? It
Yeah.
There's nothing about permits or postage that should be there.
I think that would make sense.
Okay,
Number 5, section 5, B.
Yeah.
Roy Bishop has finished the preliminary reval. Shouldn't we write out the whole word, what that really is,
Yeah,
just for clarity?
yeah.
And then in C, Gail has started the LA form. We should describe what the LA4 form is.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah. Does anybody have?
Becky, can you tell us what the LA4 form is, or?
You're muted, Becky.
It's a
My
format.
son's
It's just a,
dog is snoring, so I muted. So if he's snoring really loud, sorry. The LA4 is a summary spreadsheet of the values broken down by residential, commercial, and industrial.
So we could just say she started the a list of property valuations, and in brackets, form LA4.
Well, she's doing the summary that breaks it into 3 components: industrial, commercial, residential.
Well, I don't know if that's important. I mean, what's important is the LA form is the list of all the properties and their values. I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine.
But it isn't, is it, Becky? Well, I'll find out. Never mind.
Actually, it isn't, George. I'm looking at it. It indicates the parcel count. I'm sorry, I'll start from the left.
Oh, you said it was a summary,
Property
didn't you?
type, parcel count, and then class 1 residential, class 2 open space, class 3 commercial, class 4 industrial.
Got
and
it, got it.
class 5 personal property. So that's the basis of the LA5, where it sorts it out into the different values you were talking to. But and I'm sorry, what you were talking about is just a straight listing of values that we share on the website, and that's to make sure people can view it. And that's the backup to the 750 parcels and the $247,000 of 101 class 1 residential. But there's a number of classes that are added together to get you the $280 million of residential tax value, valuation.
That's what was in my brain, because I was just looking at it the other day when I said that. So I apologize. And then in number 7, under the expense report, just minor things, health insurance costs for FY22, or health insurance cost, I guess is fine. But I was thinking at the very end, Becky is expecting about 85,000 return to free cash. And I just want to say that's from FY22. Just wanted to clarify that.
All right.
And it's only from health insurance.
Yeah, right. That part I
line.
got, but I just wanted to note that it's from FY22. I think that's important because without that, somebody might ask reading these minutes, where did that free cash come from?
Becky, George, I think Susie should also say from the medical line, because as Becky just pointed out, that's not all we're getting in the free cash. That's just from that particular.
Well, that's the first sentence, is the first part of it, the health insurance costs. Oh, I see right. So say
The
it
same in the
second
second sentence, yeah.
Yeah.
Then it's clear.
It's in the second sentence, right? We're all clear on that?
Well, Bob is
7
also saying Becky is
7B.
expecting.
7B starts out with the health insurance costs for FY22 were lower. Becky is expecting about 85,000 to returned to free cash from that
this
line.
account, from this line or from this account, because
All right.
it might be confused with the total somehow, don't you think?
No, I don't. Okay.
Okay, any other comments, questions about the minutes? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as amended.
I second.
Let's do a roll call vote.
Arvind, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosher, aye.
Walton, aye.
Okay. All right. I think since we're still waiting on Lenny and I see,
He's here, he's here.
I'm
He's
here.
here.
okay, great. Right. So next up is a review of the preliminary FY24 budget for the fire department. Does everybody have it now? I think Becky resent it just earlier, just before the meeting. Does that everybody have it now?
Mhm.
I have it, yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, Lenny.
Aye.
So thanks for joining. I think this will be your first time kind of reviewing the fiscal year budget for FinCom. So
Yep.
and what we typically do is just have you take a minute or two to walk us through any changes to the budget that you're anticipating from, in this case, FY23 to FY24. And so everybody's received a copy of your Excel budget. And if you wouldn't mind walking us through that, that'd be great.
Let's see, I'm not as prepared as I probably should be, but off the top of my head, for all the expenditures, I kind of kept everything the same except for equipment, and I added 3,000 for that.
Right.
AEDs or defibrillators, which all the ones we have are getting close to 20 years old, and they're approximately $3,000. There's different ones out there. There's cheaper ones. There's more expensive ones. I think we should get a little better than the cheapest model, honestly, considering we are the fire department. We do go to medical calls. We do use them in real life. So I'd prefer getting one that was been recommended by by Amherst Fire.
Okay, so that would be a single unit, and
Yes.
you're anticipating that costs will be $3,000.
Yes, and it would be nice to, we need a defib on each fire engine and the rescue truck and the chief's vehicle. So that would be 4 right there. And I would propose to do 1 a year.
Got it. Okay, so you've got older ones that you're able to utilize for the other vehicles as you swap in new ones. You're expecting to do that 1 a year
Yes,
so that would be over the next 4 years. Is that it's 4 vehicles?
yeah, I would like to do something on that lines. Yes.
Okay, got it. All right. So Bob's got a question. Do you want to go, Bob?
Hey, Lenny, Bob Groves, I just want to ask you a question about this issue. If you're going to be replacing the defibs 1 a year for 4 years, would it make sense to go through capital planning instead of adding a line to increasing your budget line? Does that appeal to you, or does that make any sense to you? Because it seems like a better way to go. Because when you're all done after 4 years, you won't be buying any, presumably for a while, right?
It seems like their lifespan is roughly about 8 years. So either or. I guess I could have another line item. It seems, the cost of everything does go up. Whether we get fire hose 2 years ago from fire hose to now, it's going to be more expensive. I just bought helmet lights for a few people, and they were getting close to $100 a piece, which they weren't that price not too long ago. So this is what I came up with.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think the question is really about like if after this round of replacing those units, let's say 1 per year, starting in FY24, and then after 4 years of replacing them, do we expect this line to return to its present level or something in that ballpark? If the answer to that question was yes, then I think Bob's suggestion is probably a good one, that we just do this through capital planning as a kind of, and not have it be something that impacts the regular operating budget. So, but
Yeah.
I guess that it sort of depends on what you anticipate happening to this line after you replace those units.
Well, I anticipate everything going up in price. We got 4,000 for turnout gear, I believe. And that's just about,
Yep.
yeah, and that's just about the price of one set of gear now. So if we get two new firefighters there, that's it, and so I'd like to say no, just because the price of everything keeps going up.
Okay. Jim Hemingway?
Yes, were the four defibrillators, were they all bought at the same time 20 years ago or whenever it was? Or were they also spread out over 4 years, the purchase of them?
Oh, this is getting before my time. They've always been there before when I joined, though they looked rather newer. I would imagine they probably bought them in a group of probably like 2 years to 3 years, probably. I don't know if they did it every year. When we called, one of the dates, they didn't. I'm trying to think. No, I didn't give all the dates to all the serial numbers to the company when we talked to them. So I can't tell you exactly if they're all the same age or not.
Bob, is your hand up again, or is that from
No.
earlier?
Well, it will be, but that was a mistake. I did not put it down yet.
Okay.
Maybe I could ask Lenny another question now, but just
Sure.
a note you made at the bottom of the spreadsheet, Lenny, about the truck,
Yep.
engine 2.
Yep.
You made a suggestion of that it's getting old, and you might want to see one option would be to spend $700,000 this year, but another option might be to look and rebuild it or to renew it. Or have you done any research on that? Is that something that? How do you go about that? There companies that do this work?
Yes, Walter started going through it, and I haven't really seen anything what he came up with. I don't know if Becky knows about, because I think he brought it up at some point, though I'm not familiar with him getting a quote or anything about getting it rebuilt.
Well,
Becky, do you wanna-
AJ and I are both those FinCom representatives on the capital planning, and we should probably visit this issue and explore it when you come to see us.
Yep.
He quoted about 425,000 for a rebuild 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow.
Let's see, we've got Kristen, did you want to chime in on this?
Yes, if I may, I just wanted to point out one area that we also found with the AEDs to tack on to Lenny's request, in that not only is it exponentially more expensive to rebuild the machine, but now what we're finding is when we have to hook an AED machine up to a patient, and that information, that once we've hooked the patient up, that information is then recorded into the unit itself. We then have to take that unit to a place like Amherst Fire Ambulance Services and download that information and get a printable report. It is a guideline that must be done by anyone who utilizes an AED in any capacity. So the problem with rebuilding is that it's not going to be proficient in the new systems with the downloads that they now have to utilize. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think I don't think there was anybody was contemplating rebuilding the AED device. I think that was about he's got in his budget a note about a truck that is going to need to be either replaced or rebuilt in the near future. But I think on the AEDs, there's a plan, it sounds like, to do a new device, one a year for the next four years. Let's see, Susie?
I would like to make sure that we leave capital items over to the capital planning and not try to start a discussion when really it has to go there.
You're speaking about the truck, right? Yeah.
The truck.
Yeah, okay. Becky, is your hand up related to this? Okay, go ahead.
Am I muted?
Nope.
Okay, good. I just wanted to point out to Lenny, because he's probably unaware, Lenny's budget, the fire department's budget is very unusual in that it articulates a number of capital items, the SCBA air tanks, the fire hose, and the turnout gear within the budget. And the reason we ended up doing that instead of having a capital, one capital request is to make sure that these items that are continually going out of service by age are replaced annually at at a small enough dollar amount that we can manage it within the budget.
Right.
Because Walter had gone about 15 years without properly replacing these things, and by the time requests were coming in, they were very out of date, and we don't want to be in that position again. And Walter wanted to figure out how to do it so he wouldn't end up in that position. So the question is whether the AEDs really are capital or whether they should be listed maybe separately like the other items for the next 4 years. But I just wanted to point out to Lenny the history.
Yeah. George?
Yeah, I was going to make the same points that Becky made, because I was on a committee when we added these lines, the SCBA and the fire hoses, and it was for those reasons. And I would just say, as far as the conversation of whether these are capital items and should be discussed with capital planning or they should be in the operating budget, in my mind, the air tanks and the fire hoses are replaced every year.
Right.
There's always additions to it because there's always some going out. So to me, they're part of the operating budget because they're recurring expenses. So the question, I think, for the AED question is are we going to buy them every year? Should we buy one every year? And is that going to be ongoing? If it is, I think it is appropriate to put it in either the equipment line or make a new line for it so that we're keeping track of it and slowly bring ourselves up to speed and always have at least one current generation of AEDs, and our oldest ones are never that old. Lenny, I think that's something you just have to think about and talk to capital planning if you think maybe it's better to buy 2 or 3 now to be done, or do you think you're going to be buying them on a rolling basis?
I think it would be better on a semi-rolling basis. I mean, they're saying after 10 years, they're not supposed to be on rescue vehicles. So in 4 years, it's going to be already 4 years old. If we did it every other year, they would be 8 years old. I guess that's another discussion, I guess, but.
Well, given that, I mean, given what you just said, it sounds like we're either looking at an every year expense after you do these 4 or an every other year, in which case it's probably, from my perspective, it seems sensible to have it as part of the operating budget. But if you're on that kind of a cycle.
Yeah.
And I would say if it's every other year, fund half of the purchase of one each year, and we roll over the balance at the end of each year so that the next year you'll have the amount to buy a whole unit. So, we could still put in the operating budget and spread it out over time so that there's no debates. You don't need to bring it to town floor and waste everybody's time with long conversations about it because the dollar amount's not that large. Yeah. Just think, food for thought, just giving some ideas.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for Lenny before we wrap up with fire? So just to be clear to everybody, that's the only line, his equipment line, that is projected to increase. All the other categories were level or funded. Just for those watching from home. Jim Walton.
Yeah, just regarding the prior discussion and Lenny's last comment in here, just to make sure the message is clear. And I think Susie was the one that had this message for Lenny. Anything regarding new capital equipment, that's all part of the process, Lenny, to go to the capital planning committee. So that wouldn't really be part of our budget discussion here. That would be capital planning, I guess. When does that process start?
You know,
Becky, is that sometime in November? Or excuse me, December?
Probably. Becky, you're muted.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. There's Ellen is working on a date for the first meeting. I anticipate it to be in December.
Okay, so yeah, just for your information, that would be the place to start discussing those type of capital requirements.
Yeah. So that would apply to what the department wants to do with the truck.
For the truck or for the AEDs?
Well, again, I think for now, it sounds like the AEDs, at least I'm just, somebody can chime in if they think I'm misunderstanding this, but I think the AEDs for now sound like they're going to be a routine purchase. We're doing one a year. The plan is to do one a year for the next 4 years. And at that point, if they're not going to be an annual purchase, it sounds like they're going to be an every other year purchase, which still I think makes sense to have them be part of the operating budget. So in terms of what we've discussed tonight, I think that it's the truck that would be the subject that I think you'd want to explore with the capital planning committee.
Yeah,
That would be my understanding.
Yeah.
But I think it's okay for him to write it down here. It's just not
Yeah,
gonna be
absolutely.
for us to talk about, that's all.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I know it wasn't on the line item, but at some point, somebody told me I should start notifying people about the truck as being,
No, it's
You know.
helpful because we've got two members, Bob and I, that are part of the capital planning committee, and now you've sort of started that process of getting us to think about this is something that we're going to need to talk with you about as part of that committee.
Right.
Bob, did you have something else you wanted to share? No. Okay. All right. Anything for Lenny before we let him go?
yeah, I'm just a little confused here because Lenny informed us that we have 4 AEDs that are 20 years old, and he's recommending we replace those. It's not a crisis because we're going to be replacing one this year. They still work. They're not up to date. They're not modern, up to date units, but they should be renewed. So by my calculation, if they're going to be replacing one a year for 4 years, in the last 20 years, it doesn't make sense for us to be planning to have a revolving account to replace them on a continual basis. I still think we should look at this, discuss it further, and then see what kind of longevity these machines have and whether or not that makes sense. I personally would prefer to keep the budget level and not increase it, and certainly provide the fire department with what they need in the field. So can we talk about this further when we look at this line?
Sure.
That's what I'd like to do. But it might be better for us, for the town, and for the fire department to go through capital planning. I still feel that's logical.
Okay. All right. So let's revisit this when we deliberate the fire budget. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lenny. We appreciate it.
yep, no problem.
Take care.
Thanks.
So should I exit now?
Yeah, unless you want to hang out, but that's up to you.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Take care. All right. So I think we'll shift gears and talk about the police department's budget. Kristen is in the room. How you doing, Kristen?
Oh, this is the longest Monday ever.
Oh, yeah. All right. I'm not sure if I should ask for detail enough.
Well, it's not Monday anymore, but it feels like it.
All right.
It's been a long couple of weeks, but
Yeah.
I'm
Does that mean you haven't gotten to sleep yet?
Yeah, right.
I'm hanging in there.
All right, so I think everybody's got a colorful budget, so everybody got the pink budget sheet here from Kristen, okay. So you want to talk us through changes? Some of them have to do with the employment contracts, but there's a
Yes.
couple of other kind of operating changes in operating expenses, so can you
Yes.
walk us through that?
I'd love to take you through that. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. Okay, so as far as the police chief's salary per contract and contractual, it's the number that was on the contract as well as the holiday pay. Police officer wages are with the percent increase. Operating expenses, we'll just get right down to it. It's been 19,000 for, I believe, 7 to 10 years. Becky, it hasn't changed. I'm asking that it only go up $1,000, and that is because of one of our expenses. Usually, I'm really good with keeping the expense line low. We do have an expense. It's Central Square, and that is our portal that we use for our IMC and being able to access criminal records and the database for. Let me shut my door, I'm sorry. The radio's getting too loud.
Yeah.
That's the portal we use for our database in order to be able to basically function as a department with dispatch and all of those things. That is usually half paid for by the state. The state usually picks up half of that. And this year they threw on us very last minute that they might not be picking up the portion of that. Let me grab the cost of that. And our representative in Franklin County, who's Chief Pachorik, is now working with the state to try and get them to take half of the bill. The total is $2,127.05, and for years we've been used to paying the half portion of that. We did not know that they might not be paying the other portion, and they just brought that onto us. We're still working that out for this year's budget, but what I've heard is they either might eliminate that next year, giving us more opportunity to talk to our finance committee, and or they might pay the whole bill this year and then expect us to pay the whole bill next year. So I want to be prepared for the possibility that we might need that extra buffer for our Central Square software system.
Okay. All right, so that's about $1,000 that they were chipping in prior years. Okay.
That's right. And because of the size of our community, our amount is the 2,000 range. We're lucky we're not larger, and it would be a lot more.
Got it. Okay, so that's the operating expenses line, and then we've got about a little over a $500 increase in the cruiser maintenance line.
Yep, 500. I'm asking for $529 more, and that's because of the cost of not only the cruiser maintenance and mechanical issues, but also the 20% increase across the board for parts. We have found that not only this year, but also it's going to go up next year, about 20% in rates for pricing. It's going to be 20% for parts, 20% for labor, 20% for cruisers as a whole. So I'm looking for a little bit buffer zone as I am there. Right now, currently, we have run into a lot of unexpected fixes in the cruisers that I'm working on. Some things just typical of wear and tear. The cruiser that I am utilizing currently, the seal on the gas cap is no longer working, and it's not a gas cap. It's one of the ones that you just open and you put the gas nozzle into, and it's a self-sealing. That's gone, and so now that's alerting threw an engine light on, I have to take that to the dealership to get that fixed. Things like that have been coming up. So I'm looking for, now with the increase, 20% increase in cost, I'm looking for just a little bit of a buffer zone there as well.
Okay. All right, and then the last line is a new line for community policing, and that's $1,000. Can you tell us about?
Yes, I'm asking that we get a line for community policing. I've been working diligently on trying to sort of get a, I don't know if this is the right wording, but like a nonprofit together, something very similar to the library, Friends of the Library Association. There's a lot of community policing ideas that we have been implementing and that we're looking to do more implementation of. I have not been very successful in gathering together enough people to start a Friends of Association to maybe start fundraising at this point. Some of that is because as I've been growing in this position, I am finding my way through it and have had quite a few challenges along the way. And I haven't been able to get my attention as much. That's part of it, but more it's that I'm not quite sure if people see the goal of what we're trying to do. And the other part of that community policing line is that when we did have the police study group, we found that through our survey that the calls from the community is that the police do have more engagement with the community by way of showing up to events and by hosting events and things like that. And something great that's happened is I've had a lot of people come forward and say that they want to help out. They do want to volunteer their time, but and that's wonderful, but sometimes we actually need funds to buy things in order to create the atmosphere of what we're looking for. For instance, this Saturday, I'm not sure if you got the town announce, but this Saturday we have one of our residents, two of our residents volunteering their time to teach some of our youth in town some artistic work. And they asked if we would help sponsor. So I did, through operating, buy some items that they needed to teach the youth about the specific art class that they want to teach. So paint, spray, canvas, etc. So I'm just looking for a line to be able to implement some more community policing functions and be able to engage with the community more as the community has requested.
Yeah. And would it be fair to say though that the kinds of expenditures that would fall under this category have to do with events of the type you were just describing, sort of supplies or materials for community events? Do I have that right?
Yes, a lot of that would, yes, AJ. So, we do popsicles. So I have bought popsicles with my own money to bring down to the beach. I also have a group of seniors that on Monday I go house to house and visit these seniors who I consider high risk. I've brought them things, popsicles, things like that, water, supplies, things like that. So it would sort of be outreach and event oriented.
Got it. Okay. All right. Who's got questions for Kristen? Becky.
Mine is more of a comment.
Yep.
I know Kristen she has bought popsicles and other items, but there's also been diapers and food and different things when she comes across situations that have an immediate need. She finds people, she gives them information on lists of places to go to get resources they don't have, but sometimes some of the needs are immediate, and it would be nice, it would be helpful for the police department to be able to respond to those immediate needs too.
And may I tack on to that just one thing?
Yeah, please.
That is, I've also spoken to Gail, our accountant, and it's helpful to have a line item that if people ever wanted to donate, say, they're not donating to my, my operating expenses, they're donating specifically to that line item. So this could be something that, we start with this and it gets rolling into something bigger.
Jim Hemingway?
Yes, not long ago, we had, or the police department had some sort of a connection with the highway department, and they were able to do some of the routine cruiser maintenance, like oil changes and things of that sort, which helped to bring down the costs on the cruiser maintenance line. Has that relationship evaporated completely at this time?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
Well, the gentleman is still doing minimal support for the highway department. He has taken another job, so there isn't
Oh.
support of the other departments.
That's unfortunate.
Bob?
Yeah, Kristen, hi.
Hi,
just
Bob.
think- how you doing? I
Hanging
see
in
that
there.
your contract is something negotiated. It's partly responsible for the rise in the budget, and that's something we don't talk about because it's a done deal. But I'm just curious now, on some of the other items, like the holiday pay, is that part of your contract too? Is that,
Yes, sir. That is part of the contract as well.
okay,
And we are not going to be, that's going to stay level funded as well because the need for that is not needing to go up.
okay, my concern is, Kristen, that the budget as you presented, it's 5% increase, and, we're trying to stay, I think that the committee is trying to try to stay within level services concept. And so increasing the line for the operating expenses, you make a good point about things getting more expensive, but that's that and the community policing line, they add to the increase, which now totals 5% according to your proposal. So I'm a little concerned about that. I don't know whether popsicles, can be paid for out of operating expenses. That's up to you. You run the department. But adding a new line is something that I'm not sure is a good idea for in terms of fiscal, even though it's only $1,000. This year, it's probably, once it's part of the budget, it's going to be increased. And I don't know, I think community policing is a great idea, and I'm really pleased that you are engaging your resources in your department on a very friendly, kind of open way with the town. I don't know, we have $250,000 here to do that. So I don't know why we have to add a line for it. That's my
Hey, Bob, I'm calculating a 3.7%
Yeah, that's what I did too.
increase. And so, 3% is built into the contract. So, I mean, that's not something that is discretionary. So I think just to be,
okay. Well, maybe I made a
about it.
mistake. I just did a little division
Yeah.
on my calculator. Maybe it misled me.
yeah, so just so everybody's on the same page, I think the discretionary portion of that 3.7% is 0.7%. All right, so we got George.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. I came up with 3.7, and it's true, the salaries and the wages are all negotiated and we have no control over it in this forum. And it looks like $1,000 increase in the operating budget is out of our control if we're not gonna get that funding anymore for that one item. But the reason I raised my hand was for community policing. It might be worth it to create a revolving account, come up with another scheme for funding it. Maybe for 1 year, we put $1,000 in it, but have some sort of fundraising, Kristen, whether it's, I don't know the best way to do that, but there might be another sources of money to fund that. If you're out there in the community doing things for the community is going to recognize it. And to some extent, the community is going to put $1 in a box here and there, and you might be able to do some funding. Just a thought, if we're not able to fund it here. And it would be a revolving account. So it wouldn't be in the operating budget. It would be something that was funded externally. and you would just be able to spend it as it's accumulated. Not that I wouldn't, again, I would suggest if we're going to move forward with it, because I agree with Bob, community policing is very important. It would be a great thing to see in our town. Having a revolving account and priming that pump with $1,000 investment, and then hopefully fund it in the long run elsewhere. Then we wouldn't need it in the operating budget.
Yes, thank you. That's the idea is, I have in my head, it takes money to make money kind of thought. I need a jump start, and then my goal is to be able to sustain outside of that. That's the goal. I'm going to try and do that. I think that it's the idea that people need to see what we want to do, and then they will understand it, buy into it, and then help out with it. If that makes sense.
Yes. So that's
Okay.
perfect. And in that context, I think we don't put it in the operating budget. We, the finance committee, find another way to get that $1,000 into that initial investment. And we can talk about that. We will talk about that.
Jim Walton?
Yeah, actually, my point was along the same lines as George. I originally, I saw that $1,000. I thought, why can't we put that in with expenses? But after Kristen explained, and the potential that we would be seeing some funding from a community funding, it did make sense to me that we keep it separate. And whether it's a separate account here in the budget or something along the lines George recommended or suggested, I think as long as we keep it separate per the way that Kristen has described the process going forward.
Yeah, and would allow other sources to fund it as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Kristen before we let her go? She's had a long day, as we heard. Okay, thanks for joining us.
Well,
Thank
I
you,
certainly
Dan.
thank all of you. This time it was much easier than my first time last
Yeah.
year. So
Good.
thank you all so much. I think I'm getting there with my training.
Yeah, all right, good. And
Thank
we'll
you.
follow up if we have any other
Keep up the
questions.
good work.
All right. Thank
No.
you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right, so just a little time check. We're gonna oh, I see Miriam's here. I'll tell you what, why don't we do a couple of quick updates, and then we're going to talk about the Conservation Commission request that I think everybody should have been emailed about earlier today. Becky, did you want to update us on the boiler issue? You're muted.
Let me stop sharing. Okay. So on the boiler issue, the state has accepted Shutesbury into the MSBA program for the boiler. We need to let them know if we're going to continue to work with them regarding the boiler. We do not have financial information about what they're offering, what benefit the town they will give the town at this point. So it's a difficult calculation to make. We have some understanding of the program that they go very wide. Their first estimate on the new boiler and potential periphery upgrades could be $1 million. We are pretty clear that we've done significant work this past year, and especially this summer, bringing in a complete overhaul of the valves and the controls and the software for a new heating system for $270,000 with some changes, maybe 280. So the thought of when they start talking about a potential $1 million project in our boiler room, it seems excessive. And it was very difficult in Jackie Mendonza and I, when we spoke with them, to get real information about what would be entailed. So I'm trying to get a sense from the finance committee whether they would be in, support moving forward to get more information, or if this project just feels like it's overblown for what we know about our heating system at this time. As Bob has pointed out, and Jim, they think, the boilers themselves are big hunks of metal that will probably last forever. And it's the pumps that are attached to them and all the periphery equipment that seem to cause us a lot of problem. Jamrog is in the building frequently, even, fixing things that leak, all related to the boilers, but not usually the boilers themselves. There is potential that new boilers could have higher efficiency ratings and bring down the overall cost of fuel to heat the elementary school with. But we're also in an environment where DOER and Green Communities and the grant money available is all pushing for electrification of our heating systems. So would we really want to commit, even at 50%, a large sum of money to upgrade the boiler system, only to have the Massachusetts turning to electrification of heating systems? So that's, we have been, we have the proposal. They have, MSBA has offered this grant to the town. And I just wanted to get a sense from the finance committee to take back to the select board on whether it should be pursued or not.
Susie?
With MSBA grants, is there a component that the town has to come up with a certain percentage of spending to go along with their portion?
Yes, I think it's about 50%. But they said that the amount would vary depending on, so generally it's about 50%, but then there's the income factors of the town and other factors that could alter it to be closer to 60%, as it turned out in the first library round for the new library. We ended up getting income additions in the percent reimbursement.
So if they came up with $1 million, we'd have to come up with $500,000? Is that the case?
Well, yeah, if the total cost they came up with was $1 million, we'd have to come up with $500,000. It could end up we only have to come up with 400,000, but we wouldn't know that until after we were fully committed.
Bob?
Yeah, Becky, I would be happy to work with you and try to get more information, because to me, there's no way that I could offer an opinion about this without knowing more about what this all means. If we could modify and improve our existing heating system without throwing away all the valuable equipment we just purchased and installed, and make it better at a very reduced cost, that would be worth looking into. If that would make sense, but we need to know more about what the parameters of this grant are. And so let's get together and see if we can get on the phone or find out from some knowledgeable person in Boston or somewhere what this means, so that we can actually evaluate it and make a decision about what's in the best interest of the town. Does that make sense to you?
The difficulty is that the information comes as you go through their steps. And So when you try to push ahead and find, they're not going to commit to any figures until they go through their process of evaluation. And they want you to commit before you get that bottom line. So from what my understanding, without that process of full evaluation, they can't give us a figure.
Well, I'm not asking for a figure. I'm
That's the
just asking for
That's the catch.
how it all works. You know?
Right, that's the catch 22 is, Jackie and I kept hitting a wall trying to push to get that type of information. So it's not a matter of just making the right phone calls. They're not going to commit until they do, they put together spreadsheets that determine everything. They send out their analysis team, and then they come up with the data. And then they begin the back and forth with the town. So the question is, how far we can go to get that data and still pull out if it's
Well,
not.
Do they want money from us as part of that evaluation process, or is that on their dime?
I think part of the evaluation the town has to pay.
Crazy process. All right.
I would like to I'm going to call Boston whether I get a number from you or not, just to see if someone can explain to me how this all works, because
I'm happy to do that with you, Bob, and let's sit
that'd be
down.
great.
and
Let's
go
do
through
that
the
so that
process.
maybe just another eyeball on it will make a difference. Who knows?
That would be great.
All right, Jim Hemingway.
Yes, beware of the fact that the word efficiency has turned up several times, as if replacing the boilers would make for a more efficient system and therefore would cost us less in fuel oil and the rest. And efficiency depends entirely on the burners themselves and not the boiler, the physical boiler. So that's a misconception that could, everybody wants to have a more efficient heating system nowadays. Going to electricity, which is it true that Boston, they now are they're about to mandate that all new buildings have to be cannot be heated with fossil fuels. So if that wave begins to increase here in Massachusetts, then heating that building with electricity is going to be a monumental expense. And but I just wanted to throw that out about efficiency, because that's often a red herring that's sort of drawn across the trail as if that would be the prime reason for replacing these boilers, which should not or is not the case.
Well, it's certainly inefficient to throw away what we just purchased and trash it. That's the epitome of inefficiency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
George?
I agree with Bob in terms of, doing the research. Obviously, we need to really understand this. The stakes are very high in terms of dollars, but Becky's comment about the state having institutions move towards electric systems, that might be related to heat pumps, right? I'm thinking it might be trying to get, and my point that I want to make about that is they're going to help us fund 50%, it sounds like, if we do whatever we do. And if they are mandating communities move to electric systems and more efficient systems, however you want to define it, there's a chance that there might be more money available above and beyond the 50%. There's a lot of money out there now for residents to put in heat pumps, for instance. So, you can get $10,000, I think even more in rebates. So that's also something that we just want to pay attention to and see where that's going. And ultimately, when we make a decision, we need to be informed about what those options are and what they mean, and compare the two.
Okay. All right. So sounds like Bob and Becky are gonna do some follow-up, so you guys can fill us in at our next meeting about what you learned. There's no decision that needs to be made tonight, Becky, right? No.
Right. I just wanted to let you know for you what the quandaries involved.
Yes. Okay. How did we actually get on their radar? Did we submit an application, or?
We, in our 5th application for a new roof. The boiler was attached as it had been in a prior instance. Just to find out if there, because at that point we were working on the controls and everything else. And so the recommendation had been made, I think, by the ex-finance director and voted by the school committee.
I see.
But they again did not approve the roof and came out and approved a boiler project.
Got it. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments about this topic? All right. I think I'm going to juggle the next two items since we have Miriam with us, and we'll talk about a new request for some funding from FinCom reserves. Hi, Miriam. I've shared your email with members, but I think it'd be helpful for you to give us the background and just flesh out kind of what the request is.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for putting this on your agenda. It's such short notice.
Sure.
Really appreciate it. So currently the Conservation Commission is looking at and has been processing a number of projects with the town related to Lot 032. And some of those projects and applications are already underway. One's already been granted, and there's some applications yet to be determined. And it's a complex situation, and we've wanted some legal advice to ensure that we're doing things properly and that we don't create a dynamic where our decisions are subject to appeal, because that would be potentially costly for the town. We want to avoid that at all possible. Sometimes that can't be avoided. So ordinarily, we would go to town council, and we do that on a routine basis, as do a lot of other boards when they need legal, particularly boards that are issuing legal determinations like planning board, ZBA, Board of Health. But in this case, town council is recusing herself because the position she's in is being our attorney and the town's attorney, basically, which leaves us in a position where we don't have access to legal counsel, and we've explored informal ways to get guidance, like through our professional organization, and that's not an option. So we approached the select board with a request. First of all, for us to get in a council, we have to have permission from our appointing authority, which the select board gave us. But because the situation was created because of this dynamic where there's applications before us from the town, we were asking the town to provide the funding for us to get this legal advice. And so that's where we're at here. The select board declined to use its own resources, but left it open for us to approach the finance committee. And tonight, I believe the select board voted to support this effort. So that's what we're asking for. And just I want to be really clear, this is really about doing our due diligence, being careful, making sure we don't make mistakes. Not because we are expecting things to go to court, or we want things to go to court, or that we're going to go to court. It has nothing to do with any of those things. It's really about making sure that our permits are done properly. So
it's more, the need is more of sort of guidance and rather than representation for.
Yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. We would like to have an attorney that we can ask some questions of, who might be able to come to some meetings and be available if we have legal questions in the middle of the meetings. So we're looking at a fairly limited scope. We thought potentially $2,500 would be more than sufficient. And believe me, if anybody wanted to go to court, it costs a whole lot more to do that than $2,500. That gets you, maybe some stationery. That doesn't get you anywhere. So that's not our intention. That's not what we're looking at. And really, under ordinary conditions, we would be going to town council, but we can't.
And that's because the town is the applicant.
That's
Right, okay. Okay, so did I hear you right that there was actually activity at the select board tonight
Yes.
related to this? Rita, I see you're in the room. Do you want to fill us in on what was discussed at select board tonight?
Rita, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted, yeah.
Sorry. So as Miriam stated, the select board agreed, it's actually 2-to-1 vote at our meeting to go along with the Conservation Commission getting special counsel. And then when I understood that the Concom was coming before the Finance Committee tonight, we put an article, we put something on our agenda tonight to consider whether or not we would make a recommendation to the Finance Committee for this FinCom transfer. And, I have to just add an editorial comment. The select board did agree to support this request. It doesn't come without reservation because we really are distressed that we're reaching this point, because not only with the Conservation Commission getting special counsel, our town council cannot represent the select board either. So we are put in the position now of also securing outside counsel, which, in the ideal of worlds, we would not have this situation where we're going to have lawyers talking to lawyers. And that's where I feel that the direction, we're going in, and it's really unfortunate. It's going to be very costly for the town, but that's where we are tonight. And the select board determined that we would support this request. We do have a legal line item, but it's being depleted. And now that we have to get outside counsel, we have a number of things before the select board pending, including a host agreement. We have bylaw changes, we have town meeting, we have contracts, we have a DEP issue at the fire station. So we have a whole host of things that it was not reasonable to assume that we were going to have sufficient funds to support this. So we recommended that the Finance Committee look at two sources. The Finance Committee does have access to their own fee. They have a couple of funds where they collect fees, and those could be used for legal. And we also said the other option was to come before the Finance Committee.
Okay. All right, thanks for the background, Miriam and Rita. Let's see if we've got questions here. Jim Walton? Oh, you're muted, Jim.
Yeah, I actually have two questions. Rita, I guess you created another one for me, and that is, you're saying the select board also needs counsel on the same topic, and is that going to be another request, or is this something that comes from select board's budget, or?
Are you okay with me answering, AJ?
Yes, please, Rita.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It will come from the legal line item. My guess is that will be depleted before the end of this fiscal year. I can say that with pretty much certainty.
Yeah, okay. And I guess my other question had to do with this recusal comment. And again, I'm not a lawyer. But I guess I'm not clear on why there's a conflict between the Conservation Committee's objectives and the town's objectives, and why there's a need for separate council. Maybe, I know you went into it a little bit, Miriam, but maybe we go into a little bit more detail on why there's this need for a recusal. Again, I'm coming from the perspective, I would think the Conservation Committee's objectives are the same as the town's objectives in this regard.
May I answer?
Yes, please.
So we have to be careful that we don't give the appearance of self-dealing. Because we're a regulatory body, we have to remain in some ways separate from the town government around a permit application review process. I mean, on one level, that's impossible because we work together and we want to support the town, and you know, we collaborate on so many projects with the town, and we're part of the same community. But when it comes to looking at a specific permit application, we kind of have to stay in our lanes. So we can't have the same attorney advising us, and that really, you'd have to talk to a lawyer about what their code of ethics are, about why they need to recuse themselves. I don't want to, I understand it, but I don't know that I could explain it properly. But we have some legal questions that we can't answer any other way without having access to counsel. And it does not mean that we're expecting the town to have to lawyer up, because we're not planning any legal action. We're really trying to be just protective of and do our due diligence.
Okay, and if I understood Rita correctly, the town's lawyer can't actually represent the select board either, so they're recused from sort of all sort of parties that we're discussing here, right?
That is correct. Donna McNichol has indicated that she cannot represent the town with anything having to do with lot 032. And I just, again, if the Conservation Commission feels that there are complex legal issues, it's incumbent upon the town to have representation regarding how complex those legal issues are, because it impacts our ability to get lot 032 permitted for the new library.
Okay, Susie?
I'm distressed by this whole process. I would have hoped that even though there's a lot of new people on the Conservation Commission, they would sit down and work hard to put something out. And maybe they're worried about whether it will be appealed, but I think about what's happened for conservation commissions in the past that have also done really good due diligence and solved these problems. They used Mark Stinson, who's at the state level. That person now is Mary Grover. They got information from there. They asked questions. They worked together. They used all the heads together. And I just feel like this could be worked out with the town without escalating it. It is hard to do something new, but and people sometimes make mistakes, but that's not the end of the story. And this is becoming very expensive to work it out in this other way. There are some resources the CONSCOM has. It has some funds, and that's what Rita referred to. So I would suggest that for their guidance and for their education, they use their own funds and try to come up with a plan that all the commissioners figure out how to make this go forward and not turn it into a legal mess.
All right, Miriam, did you want to respond before I go to another question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying, Susie, and I agree that there are all sorts of resources that we can and do use. And we have consulted with DEP. We've consulted with members of the board of directors of the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissioners, including a couple of attorneys on their board. And I am not at liberty right now to explain all of the concerns that the Conservation Commission has. We met in an executive session 2 weeks ago and came to a decision that we needed legal advice. And I guess I'm going to leave it at that, but we're not making this hastily. And I think we're dealing with some unique situations that may be a little different from what has confronted past conservation commissioners. But we have a very strong commission, and we have some very experienced people on our commission, including a wetland scientist who's worked for the town of Amherst for 20 years. So I feel really confident about our ability to make good decisions. In terms of our access to other funds, what I would say is that we do have a small amount of funds available that are generated by permit fees, and we don't charge a lot for our permits. And those funds have accumulated very slowly, but there are other projects that we would like to be able to use those funds for. And I fear that if we exhaust those funds on one project for legal advice, we're going to be weakening the commission because we won't be able to use those funds for other purposes.
Do you know how much what that fund balance is?
We have some funds in our bylaw fee, which we had reserved for our bylaw regulation revisions. As you may recall, last year, the Finance Committee allocated some funds for us to get consultants, and we had agreed that if the consultation process expends those funds, that we would then dip into our bylaw fee, because we can only use the bylaw fee for anything related to the bylaw. We can't use it for other purposes like the administration of the Wetlands Protection Act. The other fund, so I guess that fund is kind of spoken for. We have about $7,000 in the other fund, which is the Wetland Protection Act fund, which has been accumulated slowly over a number of years. And we have talked about in the future, because environmental regulations are becoming so complex and we don't have a professional conservation agent, that we might want to use those funds to retain a consultant on a regular basis. Right now, we get paid consultants as a third-party reviewer for particular projects. Like right now, we're using Emily Stockman for the ANRAD for the town, but she doesn't work for us on a regular basis. She's not on retainer. And so when small projects and questions come up, we don't have access to a consultant. And we really wanted to reserve those funds for that eventuality.
George?
Thanks for managing the legal line. If Diane or Donna did not recuse herself and she was able to do the research, would she have proceeded to do the research without coming to the Finance Committee?
Were you asking a question?
Yeah, it is a question, and I'm not sure who can even answer it. But the fact of the matter is, when you on a regular basis, Miriam, do need to engage our legal counsel, and we pay our legal counsel when she works for us. And the fact that we can't pay her for this work because she can't do this work doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the work. And it would have been, if she was able to do it, you would have moved forward and asked her to do it. Is that correct? And she would have done it, and we would have paid for it. Is that a true statement?
If this situation hadn't arisen where she recused herself, we had a legal question about a permit, we absolutely would reach out to her and have used her services. I have talked to Donna frequently. She's a resource for all of the boards, particularly for boards that have to make legal determinations like our board that has a regulatory function. It's really important that we be able to have legal advice.
Right. Okay. So to the Finance Committee, what I would say is, so this expense may have been, we may have been paying the attorney to do this work anyways, but it's coming to us because now we have to hire other counsel. It does look like there's going to be pressure on the legal line. We've heard this from Becky, telling us and updating us on what's happening with this line. So if Donna had not recused herself, we would be having this conversation about some other issue in the month of May or June at the end of the year when the funds are used up in this account. So I don't see why this situation requires us to prove anything. Miriam, I believe, should be able to just hire the attorney, submit the bill if the select board is going to sign the warrant article, and we're going to have to address the legal line and funding it with FinCom reserve as the year draws on. That's the way I see it.
Jim Hemingway?
Yes, Susie concluded her statement by saying that we're sort of heading towards a legal mess. And it seems to me that just the opposite is the case with all of Marion's due diligence on this. We're avoiding a legal mess by coming up with $2,500 so that she can hire someone to consult with on a legal basis. I think this is a perfectly reasonable and good request, and we on the Finance Committee ought to support her. Thank you.
All right. Miriam, did you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I just want to point something out because this may not be clear to everyone. When I said, we want to do our due diligence so we can avoid, making any mistakes that might lead to appeals. So when we make decisions as a Conservation Commission, there's two bodies of law that apply to our permits. One is the state law, which is the Wetlands Protection Act, but the other is our local wetland protection bylaw. And if any group of citizens, a group of 10 citizens could appeal a decision, they could appeal to DEP, but they could also appeal through the bylaw, which is a separate process, and it goes to Superior Court. So an appeal to DEP goes into DEP's hands. We don't need a lawyer. DEP does its own appeal process, but if it goes to Superior Court, and the town would have to defend that appeal, then the town would be having some legal expenses related to that. So we don't want it to go that way. And I understand that nobody in this room here, and I don't think any of the town officials that I'm talking to tonight want to be adversarial, but we can't control what 10 residents might do. So we want to be careful and make sure we do things right so that we're not inviting appeals that might not have any grounds, but could be costly for the town. Thank you.
Okay. Bob?
I appreciate what you're doing, and I think it is diligent on your part to explore, to get legal counsel. So following up on what George and Jim Hemingway said, I think what the question is, assuming that others support this idea like the select board does, I do, Jim does, and seemingly George does, how do we fund this? Do we tap the legal line, or do we provide some money from reserves to this Conservation Commission? So I don't know what the feeling of the committee is, whether we make a recommendation, whether we vote, we submit a motion here to go one way or the other. I don't have any preference, but I think we have to decide whether we want to fund it and how. So we could either go route A or route B.
Well, I think from my perspective, sounds like the legal line is not going to be a workable source for this, because we already heard that we're expecting that line to get fully expended and over expended this year, and that the select board is going to need is going to require outside counsel for the same reason. So that doesn't look like a great option. So I think FinCom reserves is on the table. I'm not sure if I've heard of any other thoughts about this. Jim Walton?
Yeah, I guess I'm along the same topic. I think through this point in the fiscal year, we're pretty much on track with that line item, the legal line item. So I'm not clear on why right now we're expecting to go way over on this line. I haven't heard anything from.
Well, Rita, you spoke to this a little bit earlier, but can you respond to that?
Yeah.
Sure. So there's about $8,500 in as of October 31st. So that is in like the 40 that's for like a third of the year, and we've spent about 45% of the legal budget. If we then take out $2,500 for the Conservation Commission, and you can assume that our legal will be at least that much. So that's $5,000. So we're left with $3,000 for the balance of the year. That includes town meeting, contracts, DEP issues, a host agreement. It's not going to be enough money. So we feel that at this juncture, it makes sense for, again, either out of the fees that the Conservation Commission has access to, or the reserve fund.
Susie?
I'd like to make a motion. Are you ready? Are
Uh,
we ready? Or you can make a motion and then we can continue.
Well, yeah, we can have discussion after the motion. So why don't you go ahead?
Right, so I make a motion that the Conservation Commission take the money out of their fee funds, and that after they get that guidance, if they find they need some more support, then they come back to the FinCom reserves.
All right. Miriam, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to comment on that before I see if there's a second, or?
Yeah, you know, again, I just want to say, we don't get, the funds that we have been accumulated very, very slowly. We get about we get about $75 from a notice of intent. We get $25 for an RDA permit. So, you know, these are really small fees that we've been accumulating over a long period of time. And we really, in this day and age, we need those funds for getting professional guidance on a day-to-day basis. We don't have a professional level conservation agent. We have a land use clerk, but that's not the same as a professional level land use agent, a professional conservation agent. In fact, right now, FERCog is in the process of developing a model project to develop at the county level a shared conservation agent program for conservation commissions, because there's such an interest across the county where conservation commissions are feeling they need a professional agent to assist them. So we do an enormous amount of work with volunteer labor. I was working on our annual report. We did 82 site visits in fiscal year 2022. And we had maybe 60 permits that we approved and reviewed. So we do a lot with very little, but the small pittance that we have in this count might help us to be able to hire a professional consultant in the future. So if we drain that account, it's going to take years to recover it, and it's going to weaken the Conservation Commission. We didn't create this situation. When I reached out to an attorney that was recommended to us, she said that towns ordinarily pay for Conservation Commission's legal expenses when the applicant is the town, and that this is done routinely. It's not a situation that we've created. We've been handed it, so to speak. So making us pay out of our limited resources that we have available for other administrative costs just doesn't seem fair to me. And I don't think it benefits the town.
So we've got a few comments here. Or hands raised. Jim Hemingway.
Yes, I disagree with Susie's motion. I think that we should fund it from a FinCom reserve. This is getting to be a serious matter, and we need to follow Miriam's advice about this. So let's fund this from FinCom reserve. I think that's by far the best place to come up with the monies for this.
All right, George.
I agree with Jim, and I think that all legal costs should come out of the legal line. And we won't know that there was more legal costs if it doesn't come out of the legal line. And I also think the FinCom reserve transfer requires a document that all of us in the finance committee sign. So we will have documentation as to why we were making the transfer and that extra amount was expended.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Jim Hemingway and George said. I think we should be funding this out of our reserve. I don't know, it's a procedural matter. How do we get to that point? Do we vote the first motion down, assuming there's a second?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll have to see if there's a second. If there's a second, we're gonna have to
Okay,
vote
but
it.
I support that option.
Okay. All right, Jim Walton?
Yeah, a question for Miriam, and this is a more general question, and it's just, and I'm not looking to hold anybody to this, but Miriam, just based on where you see things right now and your experience, how do you see this process playing out? You know, if we were to go forward with, let's say, $2,000 or $2,500, whatever we're looking for tonight, to
Looking for-
support your resource, a legal resource, you then retain the legal resource and you go forward. I'm just trying to understand how does this process play out?
Well, I think that ideally the process will play out in that, you know, the town will come forward with the remainder of its applications and we'll review them and we'll approve permits and the town will proceed with building the library on that property. I mean, that's where I would see this ending up. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that, you know, the legal advice is to ensure that a smooth and orderly and proper process, so we can all get to an end point that I think we would feel good about. That would be my hope.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
All right. So Susie got a motion on the table. Is there a second for that? All right, if not, I'll entertain another motion, if any members inclined. All right, so not seeing a second, I'm gonna call on Bob.
I'd like to make a motion that the FinCom transfer $2,500 from our reserve for the Conservation Commission's legal requirements.
Second,
So second, Jim Hemingway. All right, so any other discussion before we vote? Okay, not seeing any hands. Why don't we do our roll call?
Burnett, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, nay.
Walton, aye.
Okay. So I think that was 5-1. Motion passes. Yeah, okay. All right, so procedurally, I think, so as George mentioned, we've got to do a document, we've got to sign a document, right? Becky?
I'll put the document together
Okay,
and leave it in your box. I'll try to get it. I'm out of town, so if Geneva can get it in the box, I'll try to get it there by Wednesday, but I counted on it for Thursday, just to be sure.
okay.
And then we know how quickly you all rush to town hall to sign.
Yeah, can you just, would you mind just sending us an email
Yes,
once it's
please.
there? That'll be
Yeah,
a
that would be good.
reminder for everybody.
I will send a reminder once a week until it's done.
Okay.
What's a day?
Yes.
Miriam?
Yeah, one question, just will the funds then be like put into an escrow designated for this purpose, or what account will it be transferred to, so I can?
I would assume it would just go in the legal line, and you will reference that line with your up to $2,500
Right,
request.
so it's gonna be a transfer from FinCom reserves to the legal line, and then you'll utilize that line to,
Terrific.
The
right,
reality is, as Rita said, there's over $8,000 in that line right now. If select board approved the bill, they could pay a bill if it showed up before we signed the document to make the transfer. So we'll probably have the transfer done before you get a bill for this work, no doubt.
yeah,
But if the funds are there now, it's in the legal line.
right.
Yeah,
We don't have the greatest track record, but I would think it'll get transferred before then.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
And thank you, select board, also for supporting this. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for joining us, Miriam, and walking us through that. Thanks, Rita, for giving us some additional context. And I thought I saw Leslie's hand up for a second. I just want to see if it was related to this issue or, oh no, okay. All right, so next item is the high school track project. So I think this is really, there's not an action for us to take because this project is kind of a little bit in limbo right now. I had a long drive to and from Ann Arbor, Michigan over the break. So I took that. One of the things I do is I listen to the entire discussion from the Amherst Town Council about the track. I imagine people may have read about it in the paper, but there was a motion to provide an additional $900,000 of funding from Amherst cash reserves to fund the project. This is, I think, as we've mentioned in previous meetings, there was already a allocation of, I think, a little over $900,000 from that happened earlier in the year, and so this motion did not pass. It failed with a 6-6 deadlock vote. There was a commissioner was absent, and so that I think is going to put the regional school committee in a really tough position to get to that fundraising level. That if folks will recall, the way this was, the debt authorization, the way it was structured was that there was an amount, I can't remember the exact amount off the top of my head, that was sufficient to fund the resurfacing of the track. And then as part of that debt authorization, there was language that if the town was able, well, if the region was able to fundraise up to, and I think it was an additional $2.5 million or something along those lines by a mid-January date, 2023, those funds could be utilized for what we've been discussing as option 3, which is the reorientation of the track and installing synthetic turf field in the center of that track. Without this $900,000 of Amherst coming from the town, Amherst town's reserves, it's unclear how they're going to get to that target. They're discussing the issue tonight, and I think there was a letter apparently written by the superintendent that sort of strongly kind of worded sort of his expectations about how the town was going to secure and commit resources to the replacement of grass fields. But I think the whole thing is sort of up in the air right now. But I just thought it would be important for everybody to kind of get sort of up to speed on kind of what's happening. So Susie, did you have additional background you wanted to share?
Yeah, I wrote to Mike Morse because after reading the article in the paper, I still didn't understand how they skipped over option 2 entirely. And so I asked him about that, and he said it was option 2 is just inconsistent with what the regional school committee voted. And that it would involve undoing the vote and then potentially considering a new vote and a new debt authorization. And they said the regional school committee at the current time does not appear to be interested in reconsidering their vote and having one improved grass field would improve the conditions of the soccer team, but not the other sports that would have benefited from an artificial turf field. So I wondered if we should sort of reiterate that we would support them rescinding that vote and reformatting what they're looking for. Because it sounded like unless they get told that specifically, they're not going to go through that process of rescinding the vote.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if we should say something like, we suggest you rescind that vote.
Well, so I guess my recommendation would be that we kind of wait to get information about what was discussed at tonight's meeting. Because it is on their agenda. And one would assume that that discussion was going to involve sort of developing a plan for how they want to move forward. So I think it might be helpful to learn about kind of what that discussion consisted of tonight. And then I'll try to review the meeting before our next meeting and share any relevant updates with you all. And then I think maybe we can kind of talk about any action that we want to take or anything that we want to communicate to the region after we have that info. That would be my suggestion. Bob?
Yes, so where are you going to drive to now? But
Right.
this PFAS issue is a really emerging issue. I read in today's Globe that this town of Nantucket had on the boards a $10 million project to build an athletic field with AstroTurf, with synthetic turf.
Mhm.
And it's been held up because of the concern of some of the people in the town government about the PFAS issue.
Yeah.
They've now assembled a dream team of scientists and from all over the country that are going to be studying this, and they put the project on hold until
Right.
they come up with some more information about this issue. I think maybe Amherst and the region is lucky that we didn't go forward with this, and we have time to consider all this research that's being done. And these chemicals, we don't even know what the cost of removing them are, what it would do to groundwater to have these when these fields are installed. So we'll have to. I think it's good that there's a pause personally, and that we can find out more about this issue before we commit to any of the options.
Yeah.
It seems likely that there's going to be a lot of public resistance to the idea of an AstroTurf surface. That's my.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually pretty complicated, Bob, because I think there's a lot. I mean, I think there's I mean, the public comment period in that meeting was probably an hour of students and coaches pleading for a new field. And I think it is hard having kind of listened to the arguments on both sides. It's I'll tell you from my perspective, it's hard to see that there are any kind of simple solutions to the problem, including installing a better draining grass field. The reality is that there's just enormous demands on that field. There are so many teams, so many events, so many tournaments that are played, and that it's hard to imagine that any grass field is ever going to be able to be installed and given and managed in a way that's not going to result in some of the problems that they're experiencing now. So I think it's a pretty complicated issue, and I don't know that there are any good solutions out there. But anyway, George, did you want to comment? You're muted, George. Oh, hit that.
Everything I'm hearing and reading, going with artificial turf just sounds like it's real risky. But the reason I raised my hand was Susie's comment. I'm wondering if we want to get a little more information, and then we want to, as a finance committee, have some sort of a recommendation or position. And I want to remind everybody, the four-town meeting is on December 17th.
Yeah.
We have a meeting before that, and probably on that, our next agenda, we want to talk about what we're going to present at the four-town meeting in the context of our operating budget. But we should also, I hope, have a position that we want to bring to that meeting.
Yeah.
And I hope that we do learn a lot about what happened tonight, and we can
Yeah.
talk about that. So I just
Yeah.
want to suggest that, we be prepared in our next meeting to have something to, some feedback for the four towns.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good idea. So I will I'll I think folks are welcome to, I think they post those usually, within a couple of days of the meeting on the Amherst Media YouTube site. And so folks are welcome to watch on their own, but I'm definitely going to make a point of it, and I'll try to take some notes during that discussion and share them.
And AJ, I'm in New Jersey, so if you could send it by Thursday, I could listen to it on my ride home.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
The ride home. So December 13th is our next scheduled meeting. So that's the one George is referring to, I think.
Okay, so I'll make sure there's an agenda item to discuss this. And I think more to the point, to see at that point if there's a kind of a position, a consensus position that we can come to about, that we want to communicate potentially at the four towns meeting. All right, anything else on the track? Okay, next up is the Shutesbury reval update. So Becky, I know that, so first of all, I just wanted to say that I thought it was really helpful and kind of good for there to be a townwide communication about this. I think, yeah, it's just, I think it was just good, kind of good to, since it was kind of a pretty dramatic change in the values, that it was important to kind of get the word out about kind of what was going on. So is there anything else you wanted to kind of share about that process and kind of where it stands right now?
Sure. So the 5:30 meeting of the select board ahead of this meeting was the tax classification hearing.
Yeah.
So what that does is the select board voted to have a single tax rate and not separate out a different commercial rate. Shutesbury has always had a single tax rate, and despite a few different efforts to potentially change that and shift some of the residential burden onto our commercial base. The problem is our commercial base is about 4% of our total, and our residential base is over 95%. So the dozen small businesses in town could get really hammered if that were to happen. And that argument has been made, not this year, but at many prior select board tax classification hearings. So a single tax rate was approved again this year. It's the essential piece to establish the tax rate. I think there's a couple more steps to make it final. And I apologize, I'm not an expert on assessing by any means. I've been trying to learn enough between Leslie and Jeff Quackenbush and the consultants. We managed to complete the reval process, which ended with the recertification. The list of tax rates per property were listed for over a week on the website, where they were available to the townspeople. We are moving ahead with no changes to that list. And the tax rate, as I understand it, again, struggling with all the different forms, I believe it's on the LA5, is coming in at $18.44 per thousand. So, and if I'm off, I will let you know right away, but I think that's how I read the report.
Yeah.
And
I had, for some reason, I had 1849. I think that was from
I
you.
originally had
Okay,
my projection, and again, I kept saying estimated.
Right, yeah, no,
My
it's clear,
projection
yeah.
is 1849, so, which is definitely in the ballpark.
Mhm.
So I'm happy that it was a little bit less, not a little bit more. And again, that's my understanding of what I read, but I haven't had it confirmed yet. And I will send the FinCom an email to confirm after I get to talk with the consultant tomorrow. There, it's without a head assessor, this has been tricky. We have the assessors department, which now is Leslie Bracebridge, working with a board of volunteer assessors chaired by Jeff Quackenbush, have done, have kept things going. I've been participating, helping coordinate with the consultant, and Leslie has done a great job, pulling all the pieces and documents together. And then David Burgess's truly volunteer efforts coming in, I think 3 times so far, and he's scheduled to come in again on Friday to assist on problems that are beyond a clerk, and also assist with the filing, sending of all the vision software documents that are needed to produce the tax bills. So that's the next step that we're hoping to complete. Hopefully by the end of the week or early next week, is to get all that information correctly to Vision, to Point Software, and they will produce our tax bills so that they can be, so Ellen can get them out without doing it in front of her Christmas tree on Christmas Eve. So that's been our goal, and it looks like we're close to achieving it. And if you have any other questions, please ask, and I will get answers if I don't have them.
Okay. Jim Hemingway, you have a question?
Yeah, I don't, George, you're the guy with the numbers. 1844 per thousand, percentage wise, how much of a decrease from our current tax rate? Considering that our assessments went up by 20 to, at least in my case, 22%. I was curious as to that calculation, which I'm sure you've done.
I can calculate it and send it to you. I mean, it's, you can just take the numbers that we received from the town. It went from, what was it, 2183 to 1849. I can do that math. But, the tax rate, the story, the values go up, the tax rate goes down. The question is, what's the average annual single tax bill and how much does that increase? That's because the other things are just two variables moving in opposite directions, but the division that they equal, right? That's what changes year to year. But, so 2183, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the average tax bill, it was in
The average tax
town
bill
amounts was $11 more. Yeah, it was.
the average tax bill, I think, is increases by $96
Oh, okay, that was
for the full year for the average taxpayer.
It was about $100.
Yeah, just under 100. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm just doing the math that Jim is asking because I got a calculator right here. $3.34 decrease divided into the 2183. That's 21% decrease. That's a huge decrease. Is that right? Does that make
No.
sense? That doesn't make sense, does it? What did I say the decrease was? 2183.
I think it was closer to 17 and a half.
So $3.34 divided into 2183. I get 15.5. Is that what you get, Becky?
What did you get?
15.5. 15%, call it a 16% decrease. But again, the property values went up 20%, we'll say. The tax rate we need to generate the revenue we need needs to go down by 16%. the real question is, what's the average taxpayer paying? And the average taxpayer is going to pay, I think I came up with $96, less than $100 annually. Yeah, it's a huge decrease. But, you know, if you've been reading the papers, a lot of towns have been quoted in the papers with the same information that was discussed. Amherst average taxpayer is going to be paying $375. Northampton, the assessor was quoted as $400. There was one other town, it was a smaller town on the other side of the river. They all said the same thing. Our values went up about 20%. All our tax rates are going down. Every single one of them said their tax rates went down. But it's the average single tax bill that really matters. And so Amherst property tax, theirs may have gone down, their tax rate may have gone down even farther than ours percentage wise, but they're still paying the taxpayers, you know. So I just want to make that point really clear.
Susie?
And the thing that the town wrestles with and the finance committee wrestles with is the budget. And the budget is what drives the bills. And, you know, the rates going up and the values going up or down, both of those things have less to do with the average tax bill than how much increase the budget went. And we have been sitting on top of that budget very hard. And I think that shows.
And
Any
the
other
regional
questions?
assessment didn't hurt.
Right.
That's a part of the budget. And state funding too, you know, I mean, we're hoping that some of these laws have changed in the last 5 years. You know, they're taxing things that they used to not tax, and that includes a bill that just passed a month ago. So we're hoping in the future the state is going to, you know, start to raise funds. Also, Aaron Saunders provide more funds, especially for education. Plus, Aaron Saunders has made one of his issues the tax title. I'm sorry, the payment in lieu of taxes, and the fact that, you know, this is a big chunk of revenue we get from the state that has been flat for 10 years, and that makes no sense. And he and the state auditor, the previous state auditor, they're on that issue, and I think the new governor is also very much aware of that issue. So, you know, I'm still hopeful that the state is going to I don't know why I am, because they haven't been, but, you know, they're going to maybe bump up some of the revenue we get.
And I'm also, I mean, tonight when Kristen Burgess said, oh yeah, and then the state's thinking it won't pay that bill. It's like, yeah, they do that all the time. They
Yeah.
give money in one hand and take it away in another. And, you know, $1,000 is not a big deal, but it's that whole principle, and we've seen it on our cherry sheet over and over.
Yeah, and unfunded mandates, there's no question. Those are definitely the devil, the things we fight.
Okay. All right, so question, we've got one we've got an expense report review. We're at the 2 hour mark. We usually try to wrap this up right around then. So do folks have questions about the latest expense report? I'll acknowledge I didn't have a chance to read it. Becky sent a new one, I think, earlier today. Do we want to table that? Or Bob, did you have a question?
Let's got a couple quick questions. Maybe Becky can answer them quickly.
Sure.
Becky, do you have it in front of you?
I'm trying to grab it.
Unemployment line seemed to be spent. I'm just curious what that's all about. That's page 7.
That's the transfer to the fund. So
Okay.
I don't.
So that's the, okay, cool. I understand that now. I figured-
Phew.
The other one was transfer to trust on page 8.
Those are the items that we passed at annual town meeting.
Oh, I see.
That's the mechanism for them to
Okay.
move into the correct accounts.
Yeah,
cool. That's all I have.
the funding of the stabilization.
Everything else was answered by the department heads that came tonight, so.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay.
And I do want you to know that Gail Wise submitted our free cash request. It was on Thursday, last Thursday. So we're hoping to hear by the end of the week, our free cash certification.
Right.
I just
By the end of this week, Becky?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a couple small things if I could ask.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Yeah, one really small thing is on page 7. It looks like there's a couple items on this report that are getting picked up in this report that really weren't operating budget items. They're minor, but I know this is a new report. It's a new accounting system, so I just wanted to point them out to Gail so that she could address them. On page 7, I believe it was, I'm looking right now. Under debt service, below it, there's something called RMV non-renewal surcharge, and above it, it's state assessment air pollution control. I don't think those are budget items that we budgeted for.
Those are
Unless-
items from the cherry sheet. Those are cherry sheet items, so I can ask her to
Yeah,
look.
they
at
shouldn't be here, right?
I bet you're right, but there could be a reason that I don't know of.
Yeah, I just wanted to alert her to that, because again, I know it's a new report and she's trying to figure it out. And,
So it was RMB.
yeah, they're just below the debt service line on page 7. It's called, one of them is called RMV non-renewal surcharge. And under that, in the line above it is ST, I assume it's state, assessment air pollution, POL control.
Pollution control.
Yeah, that's another cherry sheet.
So somehow they're getting picked up on the expense report. And
Okay,
so-
I'll find out.
You might want to consider that that could be happening with other things and what they might be. And then my only other question is, everything I saw made sense to me. It looks like we did pretty well in the county retirement. We're going to have a little money coming back, cash from that. We're done paying that, right? It's a one-time payment at the beginning of the year.
It is a one-time payment, yep.
Yeah,
How
so it
much
looks like we're
cash, Georgia?
on page, where is it? I read this afternoon. Now I got to find it.
Sorry, I didn't quite get mine up. Because when Bob said his questions were done, I thought we were done, so I didn't.
Well, quick questions.
No, that's great. That's great. I just explaining why I didn't pull it up.
It was page 7, right?
Is it page? Yes, contributor retirement. So $16,000 unspent. That was the one. So that looks like that's going to be going to free cash next year. And something to consider when we're talking to the treasurer about this line.
Well,
My
that
only-
was the one I pulled out my hair trying to get a number from Union 28, and that's usually where the difference is. So
No, and I
hopefully
do
this
remember.
we'll do, she'll have a better handle and she'll get me a better number. Because
Yeah,
if
that's
it's
fine.
under,
And I'm not being critical, Becky. I'm just pointing out to everybody
I
that
know,
looks
just
like there's
explaining.
16,000. And I do understand it wasn't easy. So please, I'm not pointing
oh
fingers.
no,
And then just the last thing I wanted to say is looking through all those other special accounts, I was scrolling through them. It looks like there's still entries to be posted. For instance, the capital stabilization, the stabilization balances don't look like they've been adjusted for what was approved at that meeting. Is that a correct statement?
yeah, a few things, because she just completed the free cash, things ran late this year.
Okay.
And she is just completing those.
Okay, that's good, because I just don't want to rely on those when we start doing our analysis. I'll wait till these numbers change. At some point, when she gets caught up, just let us know. So when we look at these, we know we can rely on these numbers.
Yep, and I'll
On that
remind you,
particular schedule.
I requested that it be the portrait, not landscape, that we requested with the number, so I'll ask her to resend that too.
And then one final thing real quick, the carryovers aren't on here yet, so I hope that she'll be able to do that in the future.
Okay.
Thank you. That's it. I just wanted to get those out, AJ, while I
Yeah,
have them.
no, I'm glad you did. Susie?
I wondered about the COVID CARES money. It looks like there's 32,000 left. And some ARPA funds. Well, we know the ARPA funds are there. And there was
I
some,
think there's a crossover, because I think we had a balance of 3,000, so I'll work with her on that.
okay, all right. And that the health district was overspent. And actually, probably the most relevant question for me was, the fire department hadn't spent its FY22 money towards the end of the year. So then I saw some expenditures in FY23, and I wondered if any of them were the left over from FY22.
I know she processed, no, I don't think that's right, Susie. So I'll review that because I know she was working with Walter closing out FY 22. And as we know, in at least one account, it was not understood.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Any
The
other
13th?
questions?
Oh, I want to say that I did not get all the details of that last blast. So do you want it in the minutes? Should I ask George to send me his notes? Or are we just basically saying the year is not wrapped up yet and we're waiting to see what the wrap up looks like? I can have George send me those notes, but I could not take them down fast enough.
Oh, no, we don't need to be that specific. I was
Yeah.
just asking questions about the expense lines.
Right.
There's nothing in there that's critical or,
Okay, so I'll just say that it's still not closed out and we raised some
Well, the
questions and
year is
it's gonna
closed
get,
out, Susie.
what?
The year is closed out. It's, the matter is whether everything's been set up on the new year.
Okay, I'll
Yes.
write that down.
yes. And there are still items that are not yet posted for the new year.
Right. but
That's the
Not all
sentence.
the capital items
Okay,
haven't been purchased yet too.
Right, and the
And-
transfers to the funds that you need to make those purchases.
And there's some cherry sheet items that are showing up in the expense
Yes.
report.
Those two little ones he noted,
Yeah.
yep. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, great. Any committee updates that need to be shared
Hmm.
tonight?
I do
Um,
want to say that the school committee changed its meeting schedule and they won't be meeting with us the beginning of January because they only first saw their budget at their last meeting and they will not be meeting again till early January.
My
So I asked we asked that they get moved to, where's all that information? Get moved to later.
We have an open date on the 31st.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna swap them into that.
31st of January.
Correct.
But we do have their first draft of the budget, but it wasn't concluded. They hadn't concluded their process. So
Yeah.
understanding that it's very first draft
Yeah.
and in the wanting people to be able to start looking at it. And one of the aspects of it is that the biggest increases are in fuel and electricity. And they got a first delivery that last year, that delivery was 7,000. This year it was 19,000. And so it's time to, at our next meeting, I would like to begin to think about how we deal with this energy cost that the town hall will have that, the fuel in town for town will have that, how we might approach that cost. So when you look at the numbers, it might make your hair curl, but the basic place is in the fuel and electricity, and we're going to see that in other budgets.
Okay. Becky? You're muted.
The last 2 years, the school's heating system has been running without controls,
Right.
basically, and has been just full on at all times.
Right.
I believe we're going to see a significant reduction
I
in
hope
the
so.
fuel cost this year.
Yeah, I think that's
Because the windows open, fans on, and heat turned up.
Can we pump some of that heat
It's
into
like a UMass student or something, you know?
the other town departments?
But we do know fuel costs and electricity costs are up. So even if their number is not projected well, we have to see that coming in other places in our town and how we might look at that amount.
I don't think it's that they're not projected well. I think there was no way to project because the behavior was so extraordinary in the last couple of years of the heating system. But the electrical rates have also gone up, and there's different issues happening. It's an issue, but it's an issue that's being taken on by the school and in a number of ways.
And I hear at the state level, they're saying, what are we gonna do about this? So, whether the state comes through to help towns meet those bumped up energy costs, we'll have to see.
Good luck.
All right. Any other updates that folks need to share? Jim Hemingway?
Oh, just a quickie. December 7th will mark the time and the date when we will be completely converted over to Shelled from Crocker. Crocker will no longer be connected to us in any way at that time.
Day of infamy.
The day of infamy. Now all we got to do is to get people who haven't figured out how to set up an account to pay their bill. There's quite a few of them. There's about 80 or 100 people who are being carried along, and they're going to get their service cut off if they don't. If they don't.
I was on that list, Jim, till about a week ago. But
Oh,
I think I'm squared away now.
Or the finance committee.
Yeah, and it's been 3 years since I got internet. The broadband internet at my house. This is a 3-year anniversary, so pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Just in time for a pandemic, right?
Just in time. Thank God.
Yeah, we were lucky. We were very lucky.
I was very lucky myself. Otherwise, I was going in the office every day. Personnel board met, and we actually talked to Lenny Zawanka, the fire chief, and I apologize. I probably should have prompted him to talk about a few of the things, but I'll just update you on some of the conversation we had with him. There's really 2 big items. He is considering hiring a deputy fire chief. So he wants the finance committee to do some research. The personnel board to do some research on that. We have some information that we are going to be reviewing and discussing, but I wanted to alert everybody that he was thinking of hiring that new position. So stay tuned. The other thing is a familiar lament that we hear and have heard from Walter over many years is staffing issues with the volunteers and making sure there's adequate coverage in terms of firefighters. And he was asking us to help him kind of figure out how we can attract more volunteers. And there was many things discussed, but certainly one of the things that came out of it was that our volunteers are paid pretty well relative to the rest of Franklin County. So pay increase really isn't the solution, isn't something we can do. But he wanted to consider the possibility of when there is an emergency and people respond, that they get paid a minimum number of hours. Apparently, this is a practice that's done in other towns. He said most of the time, everybody's well over the minimum. He said occasionally. So we're going to crunch the numbers and look at that and just see if that's a lot of money, how much it is it worth it? So haven't made any decisions, but want everybody to be aware that those are issues conversations we're having with the fire chief.
Okay, thanks. All right. Any other, Bob?
Can I make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
Yeah, you can. All right, let's do a vote.
Hernandez, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, aye.
Hey, George, what about the C's?
Oh my God. And the Bruins. If only the Patriots would.
Bruins are playing tonight.
How about
Patriots Thursday night? Be interesting.
Wait,
Yeah,
you guys.
Yeah, well, it's a big game.
How about our USA, football or soccer
Did they win
team?
tonight? Did they win?
They lost.
They
They
won.
Iran lost.
They won against Iran, 1-0, and that's a big deal because now we can continue to. We're going to play the Netherlands on Saturday.
Iran
It's a hell of a
Great
goal.
Satan won.
What?
Great Satan won. Iran's
Yeah,
won.
that's a great Satan.
I'll tell you what, we're undefeated. We're undefeated,
Yeah,
right?
we are. That's right.
Couple
But-
times, right? Yeah.
We
Yeah.
looked so good in the first half, just like we did with Wales, but the second half, we looked shaky. We were lucky to get out of that one. So let's hope they step up a little better in the second half against Netherlands, because that's a real team.
It's a
Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Have a good one.